Hello, everyone. My name is Donny Winter, and you are watching Growing Up with Godzilla. This is my show where I have conversations with Godzilla fans about how they've grown with the character and franchise over time. We are in the midst of season 4, which is still flooring me. It does not feel like we've gone this far, but here we are. And we've had a lot of familiar faces coming on the show. We've had some new faces. This person is a familiar face to me and maybe to many of you. And believe it or not, I've known this person for like 15 years, which is very surreal but also cool at the same time. This person also happens to be a phenomenal illustrator, a writer, a showrunner even, which we will talk about here in a few minutes. But I would like to welcome on Growing Up with Godzilla, the wonderful Hamish Steele.
I don't know why. I didn't awkward, I don't know. Hi, how are you?
I am wonderful. How are you? I am awkward too, so we are in good company.
That's great. It's also, it's like almost 10 p.m. here in the UK where we're filming, which is great. I'm fine. I'm a night owl, but it does mean that I've had a whole day of dealing with the news and the world and zaniness already. So forgive me if I'm a little frazzled.
The dystopian hellscape that we're in.
Yes.
In a whole variety of different ways. No, it's so good to have you here, and I kind of want to like backtrack really quickly and talk a little bit about our history as friends and people who've known each other. So we first met 15 years ago on my website, Kaiju Galaxy. That was like 2008 or 2009.
Yeah. And I'm like surprised you would even like remember me at all, but I remember you very much. Obviously, it was your site. And I'd been to a few kaiju forums before. I'd done the rounds, but I kind of think of this like I must have been like 16, 17, 18-ish. And this was the space that I first felt like I could kind of be myself online. And even though I don't think I spent much time on Kaiju Galaxy talking about my personal life, I felt like I wasn't pretending to be someone else, or I could basically be out, I suppose. It's one way of putting it. And, I have really fond memories of it. It was maybe at the tail end of my internet like forum usage. It was kind of when I stopped using them as much. But yeah, I made like a Kaiju Galaxy banner. I had a little sig pic shop. I kind of learned.
Was it this banner by any chance?
Yes, there's a lot of motion blur going on there. You can date it. Like I think the Cloverfield monster is what dates it.
Yes, I think I still use this sometimes to like it's so nostalgic. It was so I remember when you made that, because you made actually a lot of graphics for Kaiju Galaxy, because I tried making them. I could make some decent ones, but like having an illustrator's eye do it, I was like blown away. I was like, this is beautiful.
I mean, it was a way for me to learn the craft, basically. I kind of self-taught myself everything I knew. And I remember finding, because I used to do like signature pictures for people. And in the early days of the internet, like especially in a kind of niche fan base, you became hyper aware of basically every image that existed of the kaiju you liked. It would be like if you loved, hetero or something, you'd know like the 5 images you're ever going to find, and they might be very low res. So I remember trying to think up ways to create new graphics, and I had the like revolutionary idea to myself that I would edit like Amazon listings of the figures and try and make them look real and cover it all up with like motion blurs and lens flares and stuff. Yeah, it just was really, it was like such a good way to learn how to basically use a computer and digital art. And that led me to starting to make webcomics and even dabbling in a little bit of fan fiction, not as much as you and other people on the forum, but I did do a little bit. It was just such a nice space. And then our history, like we didn't speak for years.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were a guest on Skryonk, wasn't it?
Yes, I was.
And I had started following you and watching a little bit of Growing Up with Godzilla, but I guess I missed the part where you talked about Kaiju Galaxy because I just completely did not realize these were the same things. And yeah, I was listening to Skryonk walking my dog, and you just mentioned Kaiju Galaxy, and like everything slotted into place, and I almost like fell to my knees in the street. And I did the rest of my dog walk, and then the second I walked in, I sent you a message on Bluesky, or I replied to the post about the episode. And yeah, and then in a few hours, we basically agreed that I was going to come up on the show.
It was, when you sent me that message, it was so surreal. Like, I feel like I had seen you out there, but you also, like, you have like a huge following. I was just like, oh, Hamish can't possibly remember me. Like, like, it's impossible. But then, like, you followed me and messaged me, and I'm just like, OMG, in all caps. I was like, it's been years. It is so good to see you, and I cannot believe that we remembered all of this. So I got emotional. I'm not gonna lie, I got a little emotional.
These forums are, at least they were, lifelines at that time. Before social media, that was how we found out there were other people like us. Like, not just kaiju fans, but queer kaiju fans. Yes. I think on other forums, I'd always felt a little bit not quite like everybody else on those forums, be it because I was queer or because I was British. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the differences. I'm not saying that British people are anywhere an oppressed group, but we have our own like history of Godzilla. And I, you know, always just felt a little bit different. And on Kaiju Galaxy, I felt like there were more people who kind of got me. And I said when I was on Skryonk, because I was on the Mothra episode, that Mothra, and you had a Mothra icon. It was all Eternal Mothra stuff on the website. I sometimes joke about it being the kind of kaiju hanky code or something, but I think it's more just, even if someone isn't queer, if they love Mothra, you kind of know they're going to be someone who's safe in a way. It's like if someone is a fan of that kind of character, someone who's powerful but delicate and sensitive, you kind of just know that they'll not judge you. I don't know if that's too much of an assumption.
No. I feel that same way too. I firmly am convinced that Mothra is a queer icon. Yeah. And you know, I could deliver a whole soliloquy on why that is, and I probably have on the show a few times. But I do think that the message boards of old definitely were safe harbors for many of us in the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
When we may have been in home situations where I know I was in a situation where like I wasn't fully accepted in the spaces that I was inhabiting in reality. So I could go to places like Kaiju Galaxy or Rodan's Roost or other places like that where I felt like I could be myself a little bit more. And I remember when we first met on Kaiju Galaxy, like you had linked your profile to like your social media and to like, I think your website, or was it a DeviantArt? I think it may have been DeviantArt.
Probably, yeah, that time.
Oh, DeviantArt, the good old days, right? No, but I remember like you were very much in those spaces talking about yourself and your identity. And at that point in my life, like I was in like, I think I was like in my early 20s. Like I was in college. I was very much trying to integrate myself in the LGBTQ plus community, but I still felt very insecure. But like I don't think I've ever told you this, but I would often kind of like look to your example and take inspiration from you when it came to finding the confidence and gumption to simply even talk about it, which I think is so important and something that we don't discuss enough. in these types of spaces.
That's very sweet. I'm glad I could be that for you, and you were definitely that for me. We were just mutually kind of sending each other hugs from across the message board.
Oh, that's so wholesome.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously you and me and many of your guests are an example that this fan base is a loving and wonderful place. I think many of us have experienced the other side of it, as any fan base has, got their kind of bad apples or just a kind of more conservative sect, I suppose. But
Yeah.
I just didn't even know the kind of positive side existed for a long time. I just thought I liked Godzilla, and especially like school, I was like just the Godzilla kid. I didn't know anybody else who was into it. And yeah, finding out there's other people out there like you is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was excellently said. And I think another thing that's been really cool about reflecting on, I mean, we knew each other and then we went for years, like kind of like not in regular communication, then reconvening, like seeing all the really cool accomplishments that you've achieved over the years. Like accomplishments like having a wildly popular graphic novel series, Dead Endia, being an Eisner Award winner. Like, I mean, I'm going to brag you up. I don't know if you like compliments, but I'm going to brag you up because I'm just nerding out. But the fact that it also led into a Netflix series, Dead End Paranormal Park, right? Like, looking back on all of that, how do you feel about going from that point, all those many years ago, doing photo manipulations and digital renderings for people to now having a cemented illustrating career, writing career, having experience like being a showrunner for a series? Like that's got to be interesting to look back on. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I never felt like I was good at doing anything else other than art or telling stories. And definitely forums and DeviantArt and places like that where you could get that the gratification, I suppose, of comments and likes was what I lived for a long time. I didn't even know exactly what I wanted to do. I just know that I wanted to tell stories and basically share my love of things, be it kaiju or ghost stories or anything else, and just share my love of that with everyone else. Like, I loved monsters, so a lot of my work is about how great monsters are and telling everyone. With Dead End, you know, I started that as a webcomic on Tumblr, without much thought about it becoming anything more than that. Just trying to get the story out there. My day job at the time, if I can call it a day job, was I was an animator. So I worked at an animation studio. I did coloring, in-betweening, storyboarding for commercials and the pictures of other people in the studio, and working on this comic on the side. And you know, some Netflix executive. This is like really simplifying a big long career, but some Netflix executives were in the studio meeting a bunch of directors, and at that point I'd worked on many different things. I pitched them a bunch of different shows. They didn't like any of them, but then they knew about my webcomic and they asked to read it, and so they went away and read it, and then we started talking about making a show kind of slowly. And then we only got to actually start making it in like March 2020 in lockdown. So it was like a really long process. But between, one interesting thing to kind of lead into something I'm going to plug in this episode is, between, you know, starting out making art and the Netflix show, I was constantly pitching kaiju stuff. I had a pitch at Nickelodeon in about 2011, maybe, and I pitched them a kaiju show. And back then, I had to really explain what a kaiju was. They really didn't get it. And I would show them clips of stuff, and they'd be like, yeah, that's a bit niche. And now I think kaiju stuff is like oversubscribed, if anything. Everyone's got a kaiju project. I'm trying to pitch kaiju things now, and they say, oh, we've already got too many. And I originally wanted to, instead of doing Dead End, I was going to make a kaiju webcomic. But at that point, I wasn't confident enough in drawing like cities over and over again. I would look at like Matt Frank's art and just be like, how am I ever going to compete against that? So that's why I did Dead End. It was a bit easier to draw. And so in some ways, the book I'm working on now is a huge, project I've been working on for like decades now. And it feels nice to finally, it's like everything I've done, my Netflix show, my Eisner that you mentioned, have all been leading to me getting to finally do a kaiju book. And it definitely won't be the last. I'll probably be making riffs on Godzilla for the rest of my days because it means so much to me.
Are you allowed to share anything about this forthcoming project?
Yes. So I have a little advanced reader copy here. This is Go Man, which is my new series. This is Volume 1, Go Man, Champion of Earth. It's coming out in August 2025. What am I talking about? This year. I've been so used to talking about it as like something that's on the horizon, but it's coming out in August. And it's a middle grade graphic novel. It took a long time. Like I said, I've been coming up with kaiju stories for a long time, but it took a long time to kind of realize actually what my take was on all of it. And as much as this is about giant robots and monsters and stuff, this is actually probably my most personal book. It's very much about growing up being the kind of kid in class whose special interest is Godzilla and mechs and stuff. And so, in short, it's about a boy called Toby living in a very Destroy All Monsters influenced kind of mid-century futurism world in a city called Model City 3. And it has about 50 years after the first monster attack, and the city's defended by some giant mechs called the Robugs. And basically, this is the world he grows up in, but he's a true kind of loner, latchkey kid. He's on the autism spectrum, like I am, and his special interest, like I said, is monsters and stuff. But then he gets the opportunity to turn into Go Man, who is a giant Ultraman-esque superhero. And it sort of deals with the idea that, as Toby, he's kind of lonely. He doesn't have any friends. People don't seem to understand him, and vice versa. And then Go Man is kind of his mask. And as a superhero, he kind of knows how to fit in. He knows what to do, and everyone starts loving him. Now, obviously, that's not a great thing, but that's what the story kind of goes on to tell, that, as Go Man, he can kind of be the hero that the city wants and kind of fulfill all his dreams, but it really tires him out, and it kind of feels like no one really knows the real him. And book 1, like I said, is out in August, but I'm actually working on book 2 right now, and hopefully I'll get to make many more, because not every artist, but I'm definitely at a point in my career when it's like, I'd love to start making like my Dragon Ball, but I'm just basically going to keep making till I die. But we'll see. It all depends on how well it does. But like I said, it's been a long time coming, and I'm really proud of it.
Well, I've had a chance to read it, and I'm bamboozled by how amazing it is. I think it's a beautiful story. And I think one thing that I've really appreciated in your writing and in your illustrating over the years, especially with this and Dead End, is the fact that you carve out spaces to have like diverse characters, like providing representation, like neurodiverse characters, you know, characters in BIPOC communities, LGBTQ plus characters. I think there is a crucial space that we fill and that we can provide that representation for people. And I am grateful that you do that, because in a time like we live in right now, I think that our stories are even more important.
Mm. It's becoming more and more important. Like the main character of Dead End is a gay trans teenager, and when I originally made that as a Tumblr webcomic, I kind of wasn't thinking too hard about anything to do with representation. I was just writing about my friends and myself and just the people I knew, the real world. And
Mm-hmm.
then when it became a Netflix show and arrived in 2022 on screens, it suddenly became like more politicized and more important than I ever really expected or meant. And you know, when this book was commissioned by Union Square, the publisher, you know, it was just, let's make a fun queer kids book about an autistic superhero. And now you have like the health secretary talking about autism as something that like needs to be cured and destroyed,
Mm-hmm.
and children's books featuring queer characters being so weaponized and wanting to be banned and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And none of that's intentional. Like honestly, I would rather not be having to fight. And I
Right.
don't want to be on the front lines. I just want to give people, I want to give kids the books I wish I had as a kid. That's why
Mm-hmm.
any kids author does it. We all say the same thing.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes I see I was able to escape, like, you know, lately when it came to Dead End and like big online backlash. There was like a few things became viral and like the hate movements, but largely we were left alone, which is still a miracle to me. But you know, occasionally I see people say like, who is this even for? Like no one watches this, no actual kid watches it. And then when I do a comic signing or Comic Con or something, it's just like kids coming up telling me how much they loved the show.
Mm-hmm.
And Go Man is actually, Dead Endia is kind of YA. This is aimed middle grade, and that's because of the amount of young kids coming up and telling them how much Norma meant to them, which is another autistic character of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to give them something back and make something that they'd love. Hopefully
Mm-hmm.
it comes out and nothing goes wrong, but who knows?
I'm sure it's going to be an amazing experience. And going back to what you said earlier about, like, I don't think as queer writers or artists in general, I don't think we ever necessarily assume that we are going to be producing something that engages in any type of political commentary. But as people in the community, like you were saying, we write those stories that we never had. We kind of like look at our own life experiences as inspiration. And I think that itself, the fact that we are walking representation in a way, even if it's subtle, I think that speaks loudly. And that
100%.
I think that is what transforms into what we produce. That is the energy that we infuse in what we produce. And I think people see that, right? I think,
Yeah.
and I think they take something away from that, which is often validating and inspiring too. So, ooh, I'm getting goosebumps talking about this stuff. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't badger you about being a Godzilla fan, because we are shameless Godzilla nerds here, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I'm like, Hamish, I'm very curious. Like, when it comes to Godzilla, how were you first introduced to the character? What was your origin story?
So I don't 100% know which film I watched first. I have two older brothers, and there was just a lot of movies playing in my childhood, and definitely some Godzilla films were on just the regular rotation. And one I remember in particular being a very early one was The Return of Godzilla, because my oldest brother Harry just more I remember him talking about it and saying that it had like the best special effects he'd ever seen in a film. I don't know how he saw it. It was on TV or something, or you rented a video. But a kind of significant time for me was not necessarily the 1998 movie, but the sort of everything around it, because a bunch of Godzilla movies got released on VHS in the UK as part of like a big set, kind of to tie into that movie. Mm-hmm. And we bought as many as we could. And me and my two brothers, we kind of all had the videotape that was ours in a way. Mm-hmm. For me, mine was Son of Godzilla, but my brother Rory, I think his was Ebirah. And my brother Harry, I really remember like his one was Terror of Mechagodzilla. And but the one that we kind of like all was ours and that we watched, I think I remember on loop, was Destroy All Monsters. And I think you can kind of see that in Go Man and Things I Do, like that kind of world, starting a movie and just telling you that this is an alternate world. And at that point, 1999 was still the future, just about. Really inspired me. And I think also just getting snapshots of all these different monsters let me know that this was like a huge world. I wanted to like find out where all of them came from. And then another little thing that happened around 1998 was the BBC did a sort of monster night. And I've actually looked up to find the TV listing. And like to 99.9% of your viewers, none of this will mean anything. But the description of the night is so 1998 BBC. It was hosted by a comedian called Bill Bailey that I don't know if you know about. He's kind of
I've heard of Bill Bailey. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it was an evening of various monster films, and I've looked it up, and it was Godzilla King of the Monsters, the original King Kong, and then playing at 12:45 to 2:30 a.m. was Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. And that film, so we videotaped the whole night, and our VHS like recorded off the TV copy of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah dubbed was played just like on loop and definitely worn out. And there's so many lines of that dub specifically that are just etched into my brain. And you know how like, obviously we're talking about Godzilla, but I often find people's like, what's your favorite Disney movie? And it's just the videos that you had. Mm-hmm. It's not like objective what is the best Disney. It's just like which one you had. And I'm the same with Godzilla, where it took me a really long time to find out that maybe Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah has, some people online has criticisms of it. Maybe its time travel plot doesn't make too much sense. Maybe, you know, Major Spielberg is a dumb joke or whatever. In my head, it's the coolest movie ever made. And I cannot be objective about it whatsoever. So there was like a bunch of different movies floating around, but it was really, they weren't played on TV much. Those particular videos were like the only ones that existed, and they were hard to find as they were. And I didn't know anybody at school who knew anything about Godzilla, which definitely is what led me to go on the internet at probably an earlier age than other people my age. Mm-hmm. And I think I did see the 1998 movie, but even as a kid, I like knew that I preferred the Japanese ones. Mm-hmm. And I think going online, I remember basically going to godzilla.co.jp like every time I had access to a computer to see if there was any news on like Godzilla 2000 and then Megaguirus, and watching the like website change depending on the new film coming out was like a big deal for me. Mm-hmm. I also need to say one thing. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I went on a Californian road trip as a kid around about 1999. And in a bookshop in Santa Barbara, I bought the official Godzilla compendium, which I still have, all tattered and well loved. It's like got water stains, the cover's coming up. I'm sure
it is
its
well
authors and I might disagree on some things, but it's it comes with me everywhere. I'll never part with it. And that was the thing that told me, you know, before Wikipedia, before Wikizilla, there was other movies out there. And I basically, you know, going into the 2000s, I just tried to see all of them. And it was really hard to see all of them because no internet, no video. So anytime I'd look through like TV listings, any movie like it, I remember staying up really late to record. There's like a British kaiju movie called Gorgo. So I like made sure to watch that. Yeah, it was kind of like a moment of almost like filling up a Pokedex or something. I was like making sure to try and see them all. And it's interesting because I actually mentioned the other day on Screonk that the last Godzilla movie I saw during the kind of wilderness years after Final Wars was Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, just because I didn't know how else to find it. I just managed to like see it one day as a kind of region-free DVD somewhere. So yeah, there was no rhyme or reason to me discovering, there's no order. I just was like finding what I could. And just one final kind of memory is obviously I was getting through all the Toho stuff, but my brother gave me as a birthday present a VHS copy of Gamera Guardian of the Universe. And that was a real moment of finding out like there's more to it than just Godzilla. But the version he gave me, are you aware of the British dub?
Yes.
So this is such an interesting curio to me. I'm glad that it's been preserved. I think it's on the DVDs now. But it has an insane British dub where not only does everyone sound like me, but they add like techno music throughout the whole thing. Often
I've listened to bits and pieces of the British dub before, and the music is wild.
That's what I thought Gamera was for a very long time. And when I saw the second movie, I didn't initially like it at all because I was like, where's the music? Nowadays, I've realized that I was wrong. But weirdly, when I saw Challenges, I thought like, wow, this sounds like the Gamera like British dub because it's exactly the same. It's just like constant like doosh, 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 doosh. And sometimes they put it over the original score. So it's the worst thing I've ever seen. But truly, it's like part of my soul is that movie, that dub.
It's a vibe. Like it's like I kind of think of it in an artistic sense. Like it was in a way ahead of its time.
Kinda. It always weirds me out to think that like in my head growing up in the 90s, it was such a big deal that the Godzilla series had ended and that the Godzilla series was coming back. And those like 4 years seem massive in my head. Whereas, you know, the Rebirth of Mothra movies were happening, the Gamera movies were happening, and then 2000 came out in 1999. And then the American Godzilla was the year before. Like there was basically no time off. But for some reason, it really weirds me out. But all of that was happening in what I consider the kind of first sort of dry spell of my life.
Well, I think a lot of it was that when those movies were released in Japan, it took years for them to get released. And like I know, like I mean, aside from the Return of Godzilla and Godzilla versus Biollante, I didn't see any of the rest of the Heisei era until like 2000 and beyond that, which like I was aware that they existed because I had the Trendmasters toy sets. So I was just like, what is this gothy looking Mothra variant I'm seeing? Batra. Like I need
Yeah.
this. This fabulous looking Godzilla that has crystals on it. Like, where is the
There's
movie?
Yeah, I grew up in kind of the countryside, but we'd do these trips to London, and I'd always go to this comic store. And this is when I was a kid, like kid. And nowadays, that same comic store has like an aisle dedicated to Godzilla, but at the time, there was basically this one bucket of like Bandai toys. And I remember a couple of times we went, I'd always get a toy from a movie I hadn't seen, because in a way, like my Pokedex brain, I was kind of collecting that film then. So I had really odd choices, and they weren't like my favorite kaiju at all. But I had like a Mogera or the drill robot, and that was like a beloved toy of mine. I didn't see that movie for like another 10 years. But yeah, I was so aware of the canon and wanting to complete it. And actually nowadays, I've still got these little gaps. And it's funny, both times I've been on Skryonk, one was for Mothra and one was for King Kong Escapes. And both times, neither of the hosts have seen the movie. And I feel like many of us still, it's a good thing. It's not like you've not seen Latitude Zero. It's like sometimes there's still these little like Ishiro Honda, Tsuburaya gaps. And, as an adult, you can still see some new stuff from them for the first time. It's really nice.
Absolutely. No, I feel the same way. And I think one thing I really enjoyed about Skryonk as well is like just having those conversations with like individuals who are like newer to the content as well. Like it's fun to kind of like bond over someone else's wonder that when they experience it, right? So I think, what episode was I on? Was I on the Godzilla versus Mothra episode?
Yeah,
I think
sounds
so.
great.
Yeah, and I was just this like my goal is just promote the movie in any way possible, and just be like, this is fun stuff.
I feel quite lucky because there's like a good revival cinema in London that regularly shows Godzilla movies and other kaiju movies. So I've been able to see, one of the reasons I did the King Kong Escapes episode is that I'd seen it at the cinema just a few months before. And I actually saw Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster last week. And it's always an interesting experience because there's always like a line of people at the back who are just laughing at kind of everything about the film. I think that movie is actually quite funny, so there's a lot of moments that's fine to laugh at.
There's so much camp in that movie, and I love it.
It's great. But the thing I like more is I'm always seeing people bring their kids along, and they do not care that it's a movie from 1964. They do not care that it's subtitled. They do not care that there's like large chunks of the film of people talking. They're engaged. They're really following it. And I just love seeing little Godzilla fans be created. And in fact, I went to see Megalon there months ago with my boyfriend, and he's not seen many of the kaiju films. And he was sat next to a really little boy. And before the movie started, he was thinking like, is this boy gonna really like sit here and watch this old movie? And then as soon as the title card came out, the boy took a Jet Jaguar figure out of his like coat and started singing along to the theme.
Oh my god!
And he was like, "Oh, I am surrounded." So
humbled very quickly.
Yes.
Oh, I love moments like that. That's actually been a very frequent conversation that we've had on Growing Up with Godzilla this season, specifically like that. Like, what does it look like passing Godzilla on to the next generation? And there's so many wholesome stories like that where like kids are introduced to Godzilla and they don't really have that bias that I think many of us grew up experiencing, because we had people continually kind of perpetuating the rhetoric of like, oh, well, this is old, therefore it's silly, or silly equals bad, right? And I think part of our journey has been like undoing that thing that we'd heard so long and being like, actually, silly can be great. Actually, like many of these movies, they have aspects that have aged well, right?
What I find interesting is I have a friend who has a little kid who's very into Godzilla, and he's watched all the MonsterVerse movies, but that in no way has stopped him from enjoying the other movies. I guess I always thought that, you know, if you've seen all that CGI and stuff, like, would you connect with the traditional stuff? But sometimes when me and this friend and the kid meet, like in the park when we're walking, he'll kind of ask me questions as if I'm like the village wise man about, he'll just say like, ask me kaiju questions. And they started quite basic, but then they got really advanced. And last time I saw him, he was like, who's Red King? What's the origin of Alien Baltan? And all this stuff. He was asking me loads of Ultraman questions. And I was like, how the hell did you go see Godzilla versus Kong? And now you're asking me questions about Ultraman villains. But that's what it is. It's like I said, I always connect it to Pokemon as well, because it's like you got to know everything. You can't just like dip into Godzilla. You have to go all the way in.
Well, and it, like, I mean, I've loved you referencing like the Pokedex brain, because I do think that kind like very similar to Pokemon, like Godzilla is such a huge franchise, and there are so many different entry points a person can make. And whenever they have one of those entry points, they're approaching Godzilla from a vantage point that may be completely opposite from what our experience was entirely. Right? I know I've had a few like Gen Z individuals who've been on the show who've shared that like the TriStar Godzilla was like their first exposure to Godzilla, or maybe like you were saying, like one of the MonsterVerse films was their first. So but I always find those conversations interesting because they have a completely different impression and understanding of the character and franchise overall. So but well, so we talked about your childhood, and I think we kind of teetered into talking about your teenage years as well, right? Like as you like shifted from teenagers into adulthood, how did your love of Godzilla shift? How did it change or grow or anything of that nature?
It's interesting because it's never really left me, but 2004 Final Wars, I was very aware of just kind of the end of Godzilla being a thing. And, you know, I did follow everything to do about Godzilla 2012 for a very long time.
Oh, Godzilla 2012.
And would follow that like really obsessively. But, you know, Godzilla ended in 2004. I was able to see Final Wars relatively quickly compared to previous Godzilla films. I'm not entirely sure how. I think I may have got some kind of Hong Kong bootleg DVD. But there was a real sense of like Godzilla is now over, and there might be an American movie one day, but we saw what happened last time. I'm not going to get my hopes up.
Right.
Around about 2005, Doctor Who appeared, and that kind of took over a lot of my brainworms. It still kind of is there.
Love Doctor Who.
Yeah, those are my two kind of big passions. And I think if you stick Doctor Who and Godzilla together, you kind of get Dead India, sort of.
I love that. I mean,
basically.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Doctor Who definitely, like, Godzilla is what got me into drawing, and then Doctor Who is what got me into writing. And so, even though Godzilla was still a huge passion of mine, it, you know, it was just something that's when I kind of started developing my own ideas for kaiju stuff, and it fueled my passion to create something that gave others the feeling that Godzilla gave me. And I also think around about that time, that's when I started filling all those gaps. you know, finding the Godzilla movies that I hadn't seen as a kid, being a lot more like academic, I suppose, with my love of Godzilla. I started writing a few little articles about the history of it. I briefly had like a Tumblr kind of Godzilla page. But again, it was less the kind of childhood wonderment. Now it was more the archivist kind of version of myself. That's when I started watching Ultraman and eventually Super Sentai, which really took over. I still run like a Twitter no context Super Sentai account, but like I try not to go on Twitter as much as possible, so it has not updated in a while. And yeah, and then obviously that's what connected me to Kaiju Galaxy. Around about the same time, I was on Doctor Who forums and Godzilla forums. In a way, you know, those were the years where I was finding out who I really was as an adult, what I wanted to do with my life. And I just knew that whatever happened in the future, Kaiju would be part of it. And as a result, like it really led, this is going beyond teenage years, but I was so like aware of the 2014 Godzilla coming out. I did a anniversary zine at the time, and that's when I first kind of started talking to many of the kaiju artists that I'd really looked up to for so many years, but now consider like my friends, which is really nice. I went to like a signing for Gareth Edwards before the movie came out, and I gave him a piece of paper and asked him, can you draw a picture of Godzilla for me? And his security guard was like, he doesn't have time for that. But then Gareth did a little doodle. And so that exists in the Godzilla zine as well, which is nice. And I guess that's kind of the birthplace of like the modern kaiju online spaces. That's when like I started being part of, I guess at the time more Tumblr stuff, but then I'm part of a bunch of like Godzilla group chats and stuff. So it's never left me, and it probably never will.
Same here. No, I feel it's interesting because I've spoken to some people who say that they've had like these long gap years where they've, you know, maybe they fell out of love with Godzilla for a while, but like the MonsterVerse brought it back. Like for me as well, like that never really left. And I'm not like, I don't think that necessarily defines us in any way, but I feel like many of us found ways to kind of keep ourselves engaged in the fandom. Like, I mean, I would attribute that great drought of 2004 to 2014 as like the message board years, where like we all took to message boards. We wrote fan fiction. We did fan fiction kaiju tournaments. We made signatures for people. You know, we found ways to kind of enrich ourselves with the franchise because we just really wanted community. And I think we don't look at those years often enough as integral parts of what's made the Godzilla community what it is now.
For sure. I think those gaps are sometimes very healing. It's like letting a forest grow back after you've chopped all the wood. Doctor Who's been through a couple, and there's rumors it's about to get into another kind of big gap, I suppose. And also there was always something going on. I mean, those years we were hearing a bit about Godzilla 3D to the max. There was Gamera the Brave. There was Cloverfield. There was
the Pipeworks games too.
Pipeworks games for sure. There was, I mean, those were big deals. Like I remember voting on the monsters for Godzilla Unleashed and stuff like that. There was Pacific Rim. I was like kind of dubious of that at first, but then I got a bunch of friends through like the Pacific Rim fandom. So there was always kind of something keeping it alive, and we'd sort of find ourselves, or you'd find out that some director or some writer was like secretly a Godzilla fan and sneaking in references here and there. It's not the worst thing for an IP to have a rest. I think people need to be reminded of that.
I think it's important. And now that at that time we were like ragey about it, but now that we've gotten older and we can kind of like see the practicality of it, it makes a
Mhm.
lot of sense, right? Well, I do have some very indulgent questions to ask you, because that's what I do. So, if you were to pick a top 3 favorite Godzilla films that you have right now, which ones would they be and why?
I mean, it's not. I don't think it's a cop-out answer to say that the 1954 movie is just perfect,
It is.
because
It
there's
is perfect,
some.
not a cop-out answer. Sorry.
I mean, it's not just. I think some people just sort of say that, or they say, "What's your top three?" Not including that movie. But like, I actually really just enjoy it. Like, it's not. It's not so good that it's um you know, you're never down to watch it. I could watch that over and over again. I think it's so good, so well shot. There's always something new, some kind of new moment that I latched onto when I watch it. And also, there's so many franchises that don't have like a perfect first entry. Like, you tell people, oh, you should get into that. It gets really good by episode 50, or it gets really good. Like, watch that movie, but it like the third movie is where it gets really good.
Mm.
And you couldn't really ask for a better start than 54. And everyone I've ever got into Godzilla movies, I just always make them sit down and watch that one first. And it really shifts their perspective of what Godzilla is and can be. So I would also then say Destroy All Monsters. I know it's not perfect, but I don't just love it because it's where it has all the monsters. I love it because it just really ignited my brain as a kid of the breadth of this world. It was like stepping through the door into Oz, and
Mhm.
I can kind of, and I also think that's a wonderfully shot film. There's so many shots of it that feel like they're from like a Wes Anderson movie or something. It's just like bright and colorful and gorgeous. So there's that one. Now the third one is when it's probably those two always, and then the third movie is like however I'm feeling that day. I could say all kinds of things. I really love Shin Godzilla. I really love like the usuals. I love GMK. I love Biolante. I love Hedorah because it's got animation in it, so I'm always a big fan of that. But I think the one I'm going to say today, because I've already talked about it a lot, is Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, because again, if you showed someone 54 Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, they would get such a wide, crazy idea of what this series can be. It can be like deadly serious, war allegories. It can be a true like Avengers style like crossover monster mashup, or it can be like a time travel Terminator 2 like ripoff. And I think it's great, but it can be all of those things. But ask me tomorrow and it would be different.
Honestly, that is a great top 3, and I do love that your third fluctuates because I'm very similar as well. Like
Yes.
because it's so hard to decide because you just love like I love so many of them. Love so many of them. And Destroy All Monsters, I do think is quite possibly one of the best Godzilla films. Like you were saying, due to the cinematography, like those shots, like before like the battle at the end, like where the monsters are all converging, like so many cool moments. So many cool moments to see them all together on the screen. That was our Avengers Endgame. I'm firmly
100%.
convinced. Like as kaiju fans, that was our Avengers Endgame. And I feel like we've not really gotten that extensively. Maybe we could argue maybe Godzilla X Kong gives us that a little bit, but that's a whole nother conversation for a whole other day. Next indulgent question. Do you have a favorite kaiju who is not Godzilla and a favorite human character from the series?
So favorite kaiju, Mothra has a lot of meaning to me, as I said earlier, that kind of sense of safety. I'm very, very close to getting a Mothra tattoo.
Do it. I have one. It's great.
Yeah, I've got a tattoo artist friend who I've already got like a big crocodile down my side, but there's Mothra, but I do have a real soft spot for Anguirus. And before, when I was growing up, just because of the movies I watched, I didn't think of Rodan as part of the like big five or whatever. I always thought it was Anguirus. Now I kind of understand that maybe Rodan deserves it better, but growing up, I just found I projected so much like personality onto the Godzilla Anguirus relationship. I love that they are first seen fighting. I love that he just instantly becomes his best friend. I love the like slightly kind of odd, horny drawing of them in one of those picture books where Anguirus is like laying on Godzilla's belly, and I'm like, what's going on here? I just love that relationship. I have like a Sofubi Anguirus up there somewhere. So Anguirus or Mothra. Favorite characters, like, sorry to be gay, but just like the women of the Showa era. I love Namikawa and Astro Monster. I loved the kind of the Venusian princess in Ghidorah. I find that whole performance really fascinating. I mentioned Destroyer Monsters, the Keyluk. They are they're my alien of choice. I'm sorry, like
they're icons.
Black hole aliens or whatever, but
the leader of the Keylux, she is classy.
100%. Like, bring them back in the Monsterverse, looking exactly the same, just like shiny space nuns. So like, I know that's a bit of a cop out again, but just like there's a type of glamour, and I love the villainous ones. Like I love Madame Piranha from King Kong Escapes. I love who else we got?
Belvira. Katsura, yeah, Belvira from the Mothra trilogy. I think it's an icon.
I love if you watch a bunch of these back to back, you get these kind of archetypes. You get, the journalist who wants the story, you get the kind of scientist, the professor, get all these things. But like the underrated one is the kind of the Toho femme fatale, like sci-fi babe. And I love them. I also love that they're often the character, they're like, the merchandise is like all the kaiju and then like Namikawa and stuff. It's nice that they get to be included. Actually, this is very naive of me, but when it was like rumored that Fortnite was doing this collaboration with Godzilla, my brain just assumed it would be like these characters and not just Monsterverse Godzilla. I don't know why I thought that would be the case, but I'm like, I was truly there waiting for the Namikawa reveal.
Namikawa deserves so much more exposure on a grander scale than we witness, right?
Just those shoes. More people need to know.
The image overall, like, no, I totally get where you're coming from. And, like, we queer people in the community, we love an empowering, strong, woman in any type of role, hero, villain, anti-hero. Sign us up.
100%.
Well, I do have a bigger question, and we've kind of touched on it as well, but I think that, there probably are layers too. Like, how would you say Godzilla has shaped you into who you are today?
The thing, obviously I've talked about art and all that stuff, but something I think that's really been a benefit for me is that when you grow up as a kid and your favorite movie is like a 1954 black and white foreign movie with subtitles, it makes you grow up with just like a curiosity for cinema in a way that I can tell is different for other kids growing up. Like something being very old or, not in English was never something that put me off watching a film as a kid. And it meant that growing up, my points of reference for things were sometimes a little odd compared to my like friends at school. But I was always showing my friends like weird things I'd found, or I was seeking out just weird directors, or it gave me just an insatiable curiosity for cinema and storytelling that was different to what I was, I suppose, expected to like. And I'm just always really grateful about that. At no point did my parents or brothers or anyone I know find it weird that I was into this stuff. They found it probably very cool that I as a kid, I didn't think I was cool, but the fact that looking back, thinking that my parents let me like wake up really early so that I could record Gorgo or whatever, it's nice that they let me do that. And it's encouraging to hear that, like I said, this little kid I know who loves the Monsterverse is actively seeking out like 60s Ultraman and isn't put off. And I like that it still has that legacy.
No, that I think was so well said. And I resonate in many ways too. So, well, I mean, I would also be pretty remiss if I did not ask you about collecting. Do you like collecting? Do you collect any of the merchandise or anything?
I'm sporting a very beautiful Mothra reversible jacket right now. I've gone through different phases of collecting. Look, British homes are much smaller and we don't have as much shelf space. And I would say I love Godzilla, but a lot of my collecting and passions are books. So I have, I would suppose less figures than I would like, and most of the shelf space is taken up by books. That said, I got the Godzilla compendium growing up. I love buying Godzilla books. I've been collecting a lot of the old Japanese mangas and things, stuff like that. Just kind of, and also I'd say that I went through a phase of wanting all the toys and anything I could afford, and it didn't matter what it was. And I also loved, the super detailed, super articulated stuff. And I suppose my tastes have shifted a little bit to being, I like the weirder items, I like the kitschy stuff. I like there's I've got like a little Godzilla clock, if you can just see right there.
That is so cute.
Yeah, like
so cute.
I've got a little poster up there. Like I've got things. You can tell I love a Godzilla by looking at my room. But I think there just came a point when I was collecting everything and I looked at my shelf and I just saw dusty gray tails flying everywhere, and I was like, I was constantly moving house and I didn't have much space. I was like, okay, it's time to go. So I sold a few of them on eBay. A few of them are boxed up. I've still got a few of my like precious items from when I was a kid, but my tastes now have shifted a little bit to clothes, but also the weirder, odder finds, the things that feel more like I've the stuff I find at like a yard sale, things like that.
I love that. No, I'm kind of at that point too where I'm buying like clothes, like this Mothra cardigan I am obsessed with, and I've loved it. Even though because it's like a strange brown color, it goes with very few things. But I will, damn it, I'm going to wear it regardless. My Mothra blanket, like if it's like a plush, a blanket, or piece of clothing, that's what I gravitate toward now, more so than figures. But it depends on how I'm feeling.
Also, like there was a time when there was so few Godzilla things that I was collecting anything I could find. And now there's so much that I'm walking past the Godzilla aisle in the comic store and like barely looking at it, or I'm and part of it's just growing up. It's just like you get into a time when your priorities shift slightly with how you spend your money. But I love it. In my dream, like mega mansion I have one day, there's just like a Godzilla floor dedicated to like
a whole floor.
Yeah, I dream one day of wearing like a Godzilla like costume. Like I guess I'm not like a furry or anything, but that same idea of like I want to dress up like Mecha Godzilla or something. And in fact, actually, I think one day I'm gonna build a like screen accurate Mechanicon outfit.
Do it.
But who knows when I'll wear that? Maybe on, I don't know. Maybe I'll be buried in it.
You could come to G Fest and cosplay.
I could. I will see how I get past border security with like the pieces to build a robotic gorilla in my bag.
Going to the United States, I'm sure it would be an ordeal, as it always is. No, so I do have one final question for you, Hamish. This has been a wonderful conversation, by the way. I've been nerding out the whole time. Do you have any advice for Godzilla fans who may be new to the franchise, / advice for aspiring writers or artists in the fandom?
I said that before, that if you want to get a friend into Godzilla, showing them 1954, if there's someone who loves film, regardless of whether they are ready to watch a Godzilla film, it's an important movie to see. And it really does give people the best footing. And then show them something completely different, like Megalon or Gigan or the Gamera trilogy or something that gives you the like. And once they've seen those two movies, it's like, okay, you've seen the width and breadth of it. I've been trying to get my boyfriend into it. His film, he loves Jackie Chan films, so he's been showing me like every Jackie Chan film, and it's fun because like the more you see, the more you kind of understand the whole career. And like, this is when Jackie was trying to do American movies. This is when Jackie was just starting out, blah, blah, blah. And I think once you start giving people like a taste of the gaps that you're filling with these Godzilla movies,
of like the lore.
Yeah, you shouldn't dump all of your facts on them straight away, but make them start asking themselves questions like, this is what a Godzilla movie from the 50s looks like, and this is what one from the 90s looks like, and what does it look like in the middle? So I think that's always fun. And then the other question was it aspiring writers and artists? You know, it's tough because nowadays so much of what I relied on just doesn't exist. The internet is so much different. It's so fractured. At the same time, there's many more opportunities I didn't have growing up. You can upload your art to all kinds of social medias and become viral and all kinds of things that you couldn't really do when I was growing up. But regardless of like what's going on with the industry and technology, it's just only draw and only write what you love. And that sounds really obvious, but if I had for a second thought that I should be doing something other than making Godzilla graphics or anything like that, I would have lost my passion straight away. It's kind of, I don't know if this is an autism thing, but like when you're working on something that's to do with your special interest, you can kind of do anything. Like it doesn't, you'll self-teach yourself anything, any program, any type of doing art. I've drawn Godzilla more than about as many times as I've written my own name, maybe. Like it's what I always go back to. And every time I'm in some kind of art slump, I go back and I draw Godzillas. I've recently been drawing like a little image for every Godzilla movie. And when I got to the end, my thought was, I should start again and start doing Godzillas again. And I learned so much about drawing by doing that. So obviously fan fiction, fan art is one way of doing it, but I want to like show a little thing. So this is the cover of Go-Man. This is what Go-Man looks like. And then I found a sketchbook of mine from God, I don't even know. Maybe 2004. I was probably like 13 or 14. And on the front page is this guy. So I think they look pretty similar.
Oh my
And
God.
this guy I wasn't even like thinking about him too much when designing Go Man, but like he's there. And this book is filled with like drawings of kaiju that I want to like do one day. And so this is basically me saying like, don't ever think you should be doing something cooler or something that's trendier or something that will get more views or whatever. Just obsess about the thing you like and draw it over and over again, and you know, to hell with the sort of the advice that you're given from how an art career should go. Like, just indulge and you'll, you know. I tried to pitch a kaiju thing years ago to Nickelodeon, and instead of like not being obsessed with kaiju, I just waited for everyone else to catch up. And
we're ahead of our time,
for sure.
Honestly. No, that was amazing advice, and it's interesting that you showed that old sketchbook, because I recently rediscovered all of the old Godzilla comics that I made when it was like 2004.
Yeah.
And I like had like this moment where I was just like, I used to really love drawing. I used to really love storytelling. Mm-hmm. And I often will tell my students that, especially like, because I work with students who are like very new to writing in like higher education. And I tell them, don't ever discount the juvenilia that you create. Right. Because like you can go back to it and take inspiration from it. Because I feel like we harbor like this collective shame about like our ancient creations.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at them, like we can see our evolution, we can see our trajectory, as you just showcased right there. And I think that is why I do this. That is exactly why I do this. So, Hamish, do you have any plugs, anything that you would like to share? Where can people find your stuff?
So I'm Hamish Steele everywhere on all the social medias. I'm pretty active on Bluesky. I post updates on Instagram. I have a newsletter as well that you can subscribe through any of those links, and that's where you can find out like proper details about if I'm ever doing signings or whatever. I would love people, if they are interested, to pre-order Go Man anywhere that you can pre-order books. And if you haven't already, or you have a free weekend, check out Dead End Paranormal Park on Netflix. It has been cancelled, but Netflix are still looking at those numbers, and I've got a lot of things in development, so you know, it's always good to keep watching. And I have for the Dead Endia books. I don't know anything about like tours or anything this year, but like I said, I'll post about it on those socials if and when.
Well, everyone, those links will be in the description section of this video, of course. And Hamish, thank you again for reconnecting with me after all these years. And I am just so excited to see what other amazing things you're going to do. So,
I mean, I love talking about Godzilla. I love obviously reconnecting with you. Always happy to chat, always happy to come back. And I'm looking forward to all the future episodes of the show. And I'm still going through the backlog. It's such a good thing to listen to on a dog walk or tidying the house or just working away. I was actually watching it while drawing Go Man earlier.
Well, that just made my day. Thank you for thank you for your support. But everyone, as always, thank you for supporting the show. It means a lot. Don't forget to click like. Don't forget to subscribe. Go follow Hamish's socials. I will have those, like I said, in the description below. And most importantly, do not forget, Godzilla fans, to keep standing tall. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.